SB 8 by Hughes relating to abortion, including abortions after detection of an unborn child's heartbeat, authorizing a private civil right of action.
The chair recognizes Ms. Lawson to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I know there will be questions on this. After I've finished this brief layout, then I will yield for those. What seems like not that many years ago,
Members, please take your conversations outside the chamber.
Not that many years ago, a woman in North Texas was pregnant with her first child. An event that should have been a joyous occasion, except that it wasn't. Experiencing numerous complications, her physician told her that that little baby was not developing normally, wouldn't be fully developed, and recommended an abortion. A few days later, on a Friday, she visited another doctor who shared that same dim prognosis of an abnormally developing baby. But on that Friday, that heart was still beating. And so that mom, as scared as she was, she went back to the doctor the following Monday. And that baby's heart was still beating. And for the next few months, the complications and those dire prognoses continued. The back and forth travel to the doctor continued. And that heartbeat continued. And then one Tuesday in May, that new mom greeted her newborn, this surprisingly normal baby, marveling at 10 fingers and 10 toes and wisps of red hair. And now, 44 years and 2 days later, that little baby girl is standing in this chamber, her heart beating as strongly and as rapidly as it did all those years ago, as she lays out before you Senate Bill 8, the Texas Heartbeat Act.
Members, no demonstrations on the House floor.
The heartbeat is a clear and unequivocal evidence of human life. And the fetal heartbeat is a key medical predictor of whether an unborn child will reach live birth. Many men and women in this chamber have had that incredible experience when we first heard the sound of our then unborn babies play out in a doctor's office. That that beautiful melody of a tiny life, innocent, vulnerable, and worthy of our protection. As of last week, 13 other states have already passed heartbeat bills, and Texas is behind. The Texas Heartbeat Act will protect the lives of our most precious Texans, starting at the moment their heart begins to beat. Quite simply, this bill requires that before an abortion is performed, a physician must check for a heartbeat, and that once that heartbeat is detected, that life is protected. Upon detection of a heartbeat, the physician is prohibited from knowingly performing or inducing an abortion and can be held civilly liable unless there's a medical emergency. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do have a perfecting amendment.
Mr. Speaker,
Ms. Howard, for purpose.
would the lady yield for some questions?
The lady yields for some questions.
I will yield for some questions.
The lady yields for questions.
Thank you. And thank you for your story. We all have stories about the miracles of birth. I have my own, as do probably many people in here. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother. I value life. My pregnancies, I was very grateful for. My children and grandchildren, I'm very grateful for. It doesn't always work that way for everybody. There have always been abortions, and there always will be. What we're talking about here is some specific actions that would be taken to obstruct access to a legal medical procedure. So I want to ask you a few medical questions, if I could, please, about the provisions in the bill that bans abortions at 6 weeks gestation. Can you tell me your own interpretation of the timeline in which a woman can determine that she is pregnant?
Representative, this bill would ban an abortion once a heartbeat is detected.
I understand that. I'm asking you, though, about about the timeline, because you're giving us a period of time within in this bill, are you not?
The timeline is when the heartbeat is detected.
Okay. All right, then let's just go with that for right now. Can you tell me what is meant by gestational age? How is gestation defined?
Yes, I'm happy to turn to the definition. Under Section 171.201, gestational age means the amount of time that has elapsed from the first day of the woman's last menstrual period.
And do you know then what the difference would be if we were looking at the period of time of pregnancy versus the period of time of gestation?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
You just finished saying that gestation is measured from the first day of your last menstrual period, correct?
Under 171.201, gestational age is measured as the time that's elapsed from the first day of the woman's last menstrual period.
That's what I just asked, correct?
Yes.
So from the first day of the last menstrual period. Do you know when you actually become pregnant? Do you become pregnant during your period?
Well, that perhaps might be a question better directed to a physician.
I would imagine that most women know that you don't get pregnant during your period, correct? You know that you don't get pregnant during your period, don't you?
I would defer to a physician to answer that question, Representative.
So typically your period is the sloughing off of the lining of your uterus containing an unfertilized egg. Is that correct? Do you know that?
I would agree with that.
Okay. So your body is removing the blood, the unfertilized egg, and you are having your period. That's getting rid of what did not get fertilized. You're not getting pregnant at that time. And then over the next couple of weeks, you ovulate, and then you can get pregnant. Is that something you've probably heard before?
I'm familiar with ovulation. I'm familiar with menstruation.
Okay. So I think where we're going with this is to look at the amount of time that would be elapsing from fertilization of an egg to pregnancy to when this bill would take effect. Now, you're telling me there's no time. Is that correct? You're telling me there's no time here. There's just a point at which you hear a heartbeat. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm telling you that the measurement is by a detectable heartbeat.
Is there no reference to time in the bill? To point of gestation?
There's a definition of gestational age.
Right. But I'm asking you, is there anything in the bill and I don't have the bill in front of me right now, so I'm seriously asking you, is there anything in the bill that provides a point of gestation at which this bill would take effect?
This bill
Is there anything about gestation?
There's
in
a
this bill?
definition of gestation. There's a definition of pregnancy.
Where is it?
But I'm not sure where you're looking.
Well, no, I see the definition here. What I'm asking is, so you're saying that there's nothing in here in the bill about gestation, there's only something about a heartbeat, is that correct?
We are measuring by the existence of a heartbeat.
Right, you're not measuring by anything in gestation, is that correct?
We are measuring by the existence of a heartbeat.
I understand that. I'm asking you, are you also measuring, though, by gestation, yes or no?
I am measuring by the existence of a heartbeat.
Can you not answer that second question?
I am answering it, Representative.
Okay, I'll just take that what you're saying is no. Okay, so if we're only talking about a heartbeat, at what point in gestation does the heartbeat normally occur?
It varies. My understanding is somewhere between 6 and 12 weeks
6 and 12 weeks gestation?
that it would be detectable.
So your understanding is that 6 to 12 weeks gestation, a heartbeat is detectable.
Yes.
So would you know that 6 to 12 weeks means 4 to 10 weeks of pregnancy? So as early as 4 weeks pregnancy, you're saying there could be an audible heartbeat.
I don't know that I am saying that. I'm saying that between 6 to 12 weeks.
Gestation.
A
Yeah, and
heartbeat.
in your bill, pregnancy is defined as when it begins with fertilization. That fertilization is not the same as when gestation is measured from. So, I mean, we're talking 2 different time periods. I'm just clarifying what those time periods are right now. Gestation is from the first day of the last menstrual period per your bill, and that's what medicine says as well. That's a common term. And pregnancy actually occurs beginning at fertilization, which typically occurs 2 weeks or so after your menstrual period. And you have those definitions in here, in your bill. So
Yes.
if you're telling me that...
Gestational age and pregnancy are defined in the bill.
I'm sorry?
Gestational age and pregnancy
Right,
are
and that's what
defined
we're
in the bill.
talking about here. Gestational age from the first day of the last menstrual period, and pregnancy is, as your bill states, begins with fertilization. Fertilization occurs approximately 2 weeks after your menstrual period. So, when you're talking gestation, and you say 6 weeks when you could hear a fetal heartbeat, that's actually 4 weeks of being pregnant, basically, on average.
I'm not sure I agree with your math.
Well, what does your
there.
bill say? Your bill says pregnancy means the human female reproductive condition that begins with fertilization.
Occurs when the woman is carrying the developing human offspring and is calculated from the first day of the woman's last menstrual period.
Oh, that's not pregnancy? Why do you... No, that's not pregnancy. That may be what you have in your bill, but that's not pregnancy. Pregnancy begins with fertilization. Fertilization and menstrual periods are 2 separate things. They don't occur at the same time. But that's just an error in your bill. But if we're going to... Let me just talk about the time period we're talking about here, and you're telling me that there is an audible heartbeat as early as 6 weeks gestation. That's 4 weeks being pregnant, but let's just go with gestation. 6 weeks gestation, there is an audible heartbeat, you're saying. Is that correct?
I'm saying that a heartbeat is detectable
As early as?
somewhere between 6 to 12 weeks of gestation.
As early as 6 weeks gestation. Correct?
Somewhere between 6 to 12 weeks.
Right, or as early as 6 weeks gestation. That would, between 6 to 12 encompasses as early as 6 weeks, correct?
I'm saying that the heartbeat is detectable somewhere between 6 to 12 weeks of
Right,
gestation.
starting at 6 weeks gestation, that's what you've said. Would you know that the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists has said in a statement, what is interpreted as a heartbeat in these bills is actually electrically induced flickering of a portion of the fetal tissue that will become the heart as the embryo develops. Thus, ACOG does not use the term heartbeat to describe these legislative bans on abortion because it is misleading language, out of step with the anatomical and clinical realities of that stage of pregnancy. Did you know that?
I am not aware of the article you're referring to.
I'm not referring to an article, I'm referring to a statement from the National Association of College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the physicians who specialize in maternal health and who actually have the background in science in this field of study. So that's who I'm referring to. Did you know that it's difficult, according to these physicians, to detect the embryonic heart, any kind of a heartbeat, if that's what we want to call it, the early cells with electrical activity, but not heart, there's not actually a heart yet. Did you know that? There is not a developing heart. There are no chambers. There's no blood pumping going on at that time. Did you know that?
I don't know that I agree with that.
Well, that's what the science says. And that a true heartbeat that you could actually hear, according to the physicians, a true heartbeat that you can actually hear with a stethoscope, doesn't occur until later in gestation. 80% of pregnancies, you can finally hear it audibly with a stethoscope after 20 weeks gestation, and 100% of the time after 22 weeks gestation. So clearly it's much later than what you're suggesting is the time frame in which a heartbeat, as you're calling it, would occur. Did you know that?
I disagree with that.
Why do you disagree with it?
Representative, just based on personal experience, having heard a heartbeat much before 20 weeks of gestation.
According to the science, the Doppler fetal monitor that has that sound that you gave us a while ago is not actually the sound of a heartbeat, but an amplified version of signals. You're not hearing a heartbeat. You're hearing an amplified version of electrical signals. Did you know that?
I'm sorry, would you repeat the question?
Okay.
My apologies.
The Doppler fetal monitor, are you ready?
Doppler fetal
The
monitor.
Doppler fetal monitor, you're not actually hearing the sound of a heartbeat because there's not a heart beating, but you're hearing amplified version of electrical signals. Did you know that?
I fundamentally disagree with that.
Well, I appreciate that you don't want to believe this and that you are disagreeing with it, but I'm talking about what the science says, and so you're telling me that the science is wrong because you don't agree with it?
What I'm telling you is that when a beating heart represents a life within a womb, we have a duty to protect that innocent unborn life.
And I appreciate, excuse me, Mr. Speaker.
Members, we're not going to have displays on the House floor. Please contain it.
Thank
Ms.
you,
Howard,
Mr. Speaker.
board members.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There is no heartbeat at the time frame that we're talking about here. There is electrical activity. That is a fact.
Representative, I've had a lot of ultrasounds and they never once referenced an electrical impulse. It was measured in beats per minute.
I'm sorry, I'm just telling you what the science says, and I can't say what you've been told. I'm telling you what the science is. Now, this is the final thing I want to say before I pass it on to others. There is no arguing this because clearly we all know we're talking.
The lady's time has expired.
Mr. Speaker, may I move to extend the time?
Members, you've heard the motion. If objection, chair hears none, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I see lots of notes being passed. I'm sure a lot of people up there have a lot of things to say about this too. We've had this discussion way too many times since I've been here. This is the worst day of the session, every single session, and this stuff keeps coming up. You guys know that there have always been abortions and there always will be. Despite the obstructions that you're putting in place here, despite the self-righteousness of valuing life over what I value, which I highly resent, I also value the lives of the women and families who have to make these decisions.
This is the best
Excuse me,
day
I was
for
still
tens
talking.
of thousands
I'm
of
sorry,
unborn
what?
children in this state.
I'm sorry? I didn't
Do
hear
you have a
because you talked over
question,
me.
Representative?
What?
Do you have a question, Representative?
I will phrase it in a question. Did you know I feel this way? Did you know that I feel very disrespected in terms of my value of life and my value of pregnancies and childbirth and babies and grandbabies? There will always be, did you know, there will always be women who will pursue having abortions despite what you do here today and what you've been doing for a decade to create all these obstructions. It will always be a case that women will seek abortions because women are not always in a position to have that baby, and you guys don't have to have them. We do.
Did you
affects
know,
our lives.
Representative?
It affects, did you know?
You're asking me a
Did you
question.
know that
May I
it
answer
affects
your
my
question?
choices about what I can do with education and employment? You
If
didn't
you're
know that?
asking a question, are you going to allow a response?
What's your response?
I don't presume to know your feelings, but I do know that there are many women who have been coerced and forced into abortions and feel very differently.
Well, that's one thing that I will not agree with of you. So I will pass it on to some other folks.
Members, as a reminder, please refine your comments to the subject of the bill. Ms. Collier, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, will the gentlelady yield for some questions?
Will the lady yield for questions?
I will yield for questions.
The lady yields.
Yes, ma'am. Representative Slauson, thank you. I had an opportunity to listen to the layout of your House bill relating to Senate Bill 8 in the Public Health Committee, and I just wanted to follow up on some of the things that I asked you during that committee hearing dealing with the civil lawsuits that this bill provides for. So one of the things I just wanted to just set the floor, the basic information that as we sit here today, abortion is legal in the United States, including Texas, up to 20 weeks. Is that correct?
Currently, Texas has a ban on abortions after 20 weeks.
Okay, but that's not what I asked you. I asked you, currently, abortion in Texas is legal up to 20 weeks. Is that correct?
In the legislative findings at the front of this bill, we recognize that pre-Roe Wade abortion statutes were not repealed. They are not enforced following the Roe decision.
So based on the United States Supreme Court decision of Roe v. Wade, which is what we're to follow, correct? We're supposed to follow the United States.
I'm so sorry.
Based on the decision of the United States Supreme Court, it becomes the law of the land. Would you agree with that?
I would disagree with your interpretation of law of the land.
Okay, well, law of the state of Texas that we must follow. I'm just trying to, do you acknowledge and recognize that abortion is legal up to 20 weeks in the state of Texas and the United States?
I recognize that there is a 20-week ban on abortion in Texas at this point.
So that means that your answer would be yes. That's what I'm going to take your answer to be, because the inverse is yes, it is legal, because the ban is after 20 weeks, correct?
The current ban is a 20-week abortion ban.
So my question was, up to 20 weeks, abortion is legal.
Before that, statutes making abortion illegal are not being enforced.
Well, do you understand that the United States Supreme Court has said an abortion is legal up to 20 weeks? It's constitutional?
Abortion is not a constitutional right. There have been cases dealing with abortion, but there's no right to abortion in the Constitution.
Well, do you disagree that the United States Supreme Court has said that abortion is legal up to 20 weeks? I'm going to keep asking the question to see until you answer it.
Presently, there is a 20-week ban in Texas.
Okay, 20-week ban on abortion?
After 20 weeks pregnancy, currently an abortion is not permissible in Texas. What this bill that we're here to talk about would do is prohibit an abortion after a heartbeat is detected.
Okay, so that would be that would not be in line with what the United States Supreme Court has determined to be legal.
This would be fully within the Constitution.
Okay, so your bill creates a new restriction on abortion that is more stringent than what the United States Supreme Court has said was legal.
This bill would provide that upon detection of a heartbeat, an abortion is prohibited outside an instance of a medical emergency.
Okay, so Senate Bill 8 creates a private cause of action that allows any person to sue, either a provider who provides abortions or any person who helps someone obtain an abortion. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, you were dealing with the definition of
Well, I just want to make
person?
sure. Create a private cause of action. So SB 8 creates a private cause of action that allows any person to sue either a provider who provides abortion or any person who helps someone obtain an abortion. Is that correct? There's no limit on who can file the lawsuit.
Are you referring to a specific section?
Well, I'm referring to your bill that creates a civil cause of action.
Correct.
And so whenever you have a lawsuit, they have two parties, of course, you know that. You have somebody who brings the complaint and then somebody who's trying to defend themselves against it. So in your bill, it allows anyone to file the action, to sue. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So now that anyone can sue, I don't have to have, so you're creating a new form of standing. So I don't even have to know you, but if I find out that you've had an abortion in contravention to this bill, to this act that you're creating, I can file a lawsuit. Anyone can file a lawsuit.
Standing under this act is provided to any person.
To any person. So we're opening up more lawsuits by creating standing and giving it to any person in this state. Is that correct? So I have no relationship with you, I don't know you, I can still file the lawsuit under your bill.
Any person may have standing under this bill.
So even someone who raped the victim can file a lawsuit?
We have an amendment pending on that. Not yet. We'll have an amendment on that, Representative.
So you're going to change that? So let's go down to your bill that talks about the liability for violation or aiding and abetting a violation. One part in Senate Bill 8 says that any person, like you said, other than an officer or employee of a state, local government in Texas to bring a civil action against any person who intends to commit such a violation. can you explain to us and give us the scenarios of what that would apply to? What does it mean by intend to commit such a violation?
Well, Representative, I think that intent is a well-recognized legal principle.
Well, I don't know what you mean by intends to commit such a violation. How would you know that someone intended to commit a violation?
Well, I suppose that would be a question for a trier of fact.
Okay, so that's a question for a trier of fact. But you don't know, I mean, can you give us an explanation of what you mean by that? I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, because if this is going to be the law, we need to know how it's going to be applied.
To a specific fact pattern that would be
Or
evaluated.
just give me an example.
I don't have an example prepared for you, Representative.
Okay, so then there's statutory damages that are available under this civil liability claim. It's $10,000. Who would get that money?
The prevailing party.
So someone I don't know, who has no connection with me whatsoever, I find out that you are getting an abortion that is in violation of this act. I can get $10,000 because I proved up that case, and I just because I can get $10,000.
This act provides for a civil penalty of $10,000 for a violation of the act.
Okay, who gets the penalty money?
The successful claimant in that cause of action.
And even though they have no relation, no other connection to the case, they can get money. I mean, it's just like a lottery, basically. I mean, it seems like if I can get information about it, is there anything that says that if they worked at the clinic or the place that they shouldn't be able to collect the statutory penalty?
Any person has standing to bring a cause of action.
I understand that, but I'm just trying to figure out if you have any type of limitations on where the money goes and who can collect that money.
The
No?
damages, were
Okay.
they assessed in a civil action, would go to the prevailing party.
Okay, and then also under your bill, it says that venue is wherever the claimant lives. So if this happened in Dallas, but they live in El Paso, they can file the lawsuit in El Paso because that's what your bill allows for. Is that correct?
The bill allows for several venue options.
But it also allows for me to live in a different city of where you live, where this happened, to file the lawsuit.
One of the venue options is the county of residence of the claimant.
Ladies' time's expired.
Mr. Speaker,
Ms. Collier, for what purpose?
move to extend the time for the gentlelady.
Members, this motion requires unanimous consent. Is there unanimous consent to extend the time? There is not unanimous consent to extend the time. Mr. Turner, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, I would move to extend the representative's time in light of the import of this legislation, and I would hope that the body would grant unanimous consent.
The lady's time has been extended.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Turner, for what purpose?
Would the gentlelady yield for some questions?
Would the lady yield for questions?
Yield for questions.
The lady
yes.
yields for questions.
Thank you, Representative. Do you know how many abortion restrictions are currently in place in Texas?
I'm not advised on a specific number.
All right. Would you be surprised to learn that there's already more than 24 such laws in place?
Well, Representative, we're dealing with a topic that exterminates a human life.
And would you agree that Texas already has some of the most restrictive abortion laws in the United States of America?
I do not agree.
You do not agree with that? Okay. Are you familiar with the laws we already have on the books?
I am familiar with many of the laws that we have.
Do you know how many other states have introduced or passed a 6-week ban similar to what you are proposing here today?
I'm familiar with states that have introduced a heartbeat bill.
Do you know how many that is?
I believe that as of last week, 13 states had passed a heartbeat bill.
Okay. And there are other states, I presume, that have legislation pending, perhaps not passed, but it's moving in other states. Is that right?
I'm not advised on that.
Okay. Is it correct that these bills, given that how similar they are in nature, are part of a nationwide strategy to ban abortion state by state?
Representative, this bill is designed to protect innocent unborn life in Texas.
Yeah, I understand. Is it part of a nationwide strategy, though, to ban abortion state by state?
I'm not advised on nationwide strategies.
Are you familiar with a group called Faith to Action?
I'm not familiar, Representative.
Okay. So Faith to Action is the group that originated this copycat legislation, of which SB 8 is part of, for the 6-week abortion ban. So are you familiar with Janet Porter, who's the founder of Faith to Action?
I believe I heard testimony from Ms. Porter in the Senate a few weeks ago on this bill.
Okay. And so Ms. Porter, it turns out, was part of the birther movement, and Faith to Action, which she founded, has actually been designated a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Were you aware of that?
I'm not advised on any of that, Representative.
Okay. Do you know what dominion theology is?
I'm not advised.
Okay. It's an extreme religious viewpoint that Ms. Porter, who's the originator of this bill, has been a proponent of. Let's shift gears a little bit. You're familiar with the fact that Texas has an exceptionally high maternal mortality rate, are you not?
I'm not advised on the mortality rate, Representative.
Well, I'm not asking you exactly what the rate is. You are aware we have a high mortality rate in general.
I would agree with you that any maternal mortality is a very sad circumstance, Representative.
And you're aware that Texas has a high maternal mortality rate?
I'm not aware of a comparative rate to determine.
Okay. We've actually had some legislation talking about that this session because it's fairly well known. Are you aware that maternal mortality rates, while high across the board, are particularly high with African American women in Texas? Are you aware of that?
I'm not advised on maternal mortality rates in relation to this bill, Representative.
Would you agree that maternal mortality, whatever the rate is often a result of poor access to health care?
I am not advised on maternal mortality rates as it relates to this bill, Representative.
It's not a trick question. If you don't have access to health care, do you have a better chance of suffering maternal mortality, of dying while pregnant or during childbirth or after childbirth? Is that a fair generalization that you would have less of a chance of a successful, healthy delivery and postpartum period if you don't have access to adequate health care?
Representative, a successful abortion
That's not my question.
is a mortality issue for that child.
I'm talking about maternal
womb.
mortality.
I'm talking about fetal mortality.
So, would you agree that lack of access to health care is one of the barriers to access to contraception? Would you agree with that?
I'm sorry, would you repeat your question?
Sure. Would you agree that a lack of access to health care is one of the barriers to accessing contraception?
I'm not advised on that in relation to this bill.
Well, what is your opinion?
My opinion is that we owe a duty to innocent unborn lives to protect those lives from the moment a heart begins beating.
I'm sorry, would you restate that? I apologize.
My opinion is that we owe a duty to innocent unborn lives to protect that life from the moment the heart begins beating.
Okay. Do you agree with the statement that if a woman wants to get a prescription for a contraceptive, that having access to a primary care provider, a PCP, is helpful in being able to access contraception? Would you agree with that?
My apologies, I think I missed the first clause of your question.
Would you agree that if a woman has access to a doctor, a primary care provider, she would have an easier time accessing a prescription for contraception than if she did not have access to a health care provider?
I'm not advised on that issue in relation to protecting an innocent life upon detection of a heartbeat.
Okay. Okay, I was
Thank
waiting
you,
till
Representative. Thank you.
You're welcome. Would you agree that less access to contraception leads to higher rates of unintended pregnancies?
I'm not advised on that
Again,
in
I'm
relation
not
to a
asking you
heartbeat bill.
to cite any data or statistics. I'm not asking that. I'm just asking your opinion. If a population does not have access to contraception, could that lead to higher rates of unintended pregnancies?
I'm so sorry, Representative. I'm not advised on that.
And so, are you aware that family planning services, including access to contraception, while you're not advised on it, I'm going to presume that you would recognize that those are valuable services to help families, individuals, women decide when they want to become pregnant. Are you aware that there are a lot of people in the state of Texas, but particularly in the Hispanic and African American communities that are disproportionately underserved in that regard? Would you agree with that?
I'm not advised on that matter, Representative.
Okay. So you're not sure or aware, just to recap this, if access to contraception in any way relates to rate of unintended pregnancies?
What I am confident of is that
yes or no
every
would be fine.
heartbeat matters and is worth our protection.
But you can't speak to whether access to health care, including access to contraception, has anything to do with the rate of unintended pregnancies.
Representative, that's not the subject of this bill, and I'm not advised
Well,
on
I think
that
it
matter.
is. Representative, this bill is about abortion, is it not?
This bill is about protecting a beating heart.
Why does someone get an abortion?
I am not advised to
Multiple
respond for
reasons,
those.
complex reasons, complicated reasons, I would imagine. Is it possible that an unintended pregnancy could result in somebody deciding that abortion is the choice they need to make? Is that possible, that that's one of the causes?
The lady's time's expired. Please excuse Representative Clardy because of important business in the district on the motion of Representative Ashby. With objection, chair hears none, so ordered. The following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Slauson.
The chair recognizes Ms. Slauson to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I offer members an amendment to clarify that the cause of action may not be brought by a person who impregnated the abortion patient through an act of rape, sexual assault, incest, or any other act prohibited by sections 22.011, 22.021, or 2502 Penal Code.
Mr. Raymond, for what purpose? Ms. Cole, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the author.
Does the lady yield for questions?
I yield for questions on the amendment. Yes, ma'am.
She yields for questions.
Yes, I want to understand better what your amendment does. Does it make an exception for rape or incest?
It provides that a civil cause of action may not be brought by a person who impregnated the abortion patient through an act of rape, sexual assault, incest, or any other specifically prohibited acts in the Penal Code.
So it only provides an exception for the person who actually impregnated or incested or committed incest against the pregnant person, but it does not provide for an exception if other people bring a cause of action.
Representative, it specifically lists the people who may not bring a cause of action under this act.
And it's my understanding that you limited those people to the person who actually committed rape or incest, not any others.
It specifically provides that a civil action may not be brought by a person who impregnated the abortion patient through an act of rape, sexual assault, incest, or any of those specifically codified penal code
So
sections.
your amendment does not speak to a person other than the person who raped or incested the individual.
Representative, I'm reading specifically who it applies to.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Ms. Ramos, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, will the gentlelady yield for some questions?
Will the lady yield for questions?
I will yield
The
for
lady
questions.
yields.
Thank you. Representative Swanson, I reviewed your amendment, but as attorneys, most of us here are, it says what a cause of action is prohibited in those specific areas, but we know that people sue all the time, even though there's no grounds for it. Would you agree?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Would you agree that people sue, even though they know they don't have any grounds for it, people still sue for the sake of suing and, sometimes it's malicious litigation, but people still sue for various reasons, even though the statute may say they won't be able to recover. Would you agree with that? People still sue for any reason many times.
I would agree that people bring lawsuits for their own reasons.
Okay, so in reading what your amendment says, it says someone may not be able to bring a cause of action under rape, incest. However, and in reviewing in your bill, if you could guide me or educate us on if they do, because we could tell people all day, all long what they can't do, but if they still do and still choose to sue somebody, what recovery mechanism or what's in place in your bill to protect the woman from some man who is saying that he didn't rape her? She's saying he did. She had to have an abortion, so he still decides to sue her. What kind of defense does the woman have, the victim of the rape, if in fact she is still being sued for that, for the abortion?
That was a very complex question there.
Okay.
To which I will
Let me
say
break
that
it down
a
for
woman.
you. I would break it down for you, Representative Swanson. A man rapes a woman.
Do you want me to correct it or not?
Are you there? You get that part? A man rapes a woman. I'm sorry, Swanson. Slauson. Pardon me, I'm sorry. A man breaks a...
Members, take your conversations outside the chamber.
If a man rapes a woman, she's saying that it was not consensual, he's saying it was. If the woman becomes pregnant and chooses to have an abortion, the man, then she never raised any claims that he raped her, but she's saying, you know what, I'm gonna take care of what I need to take care of and hope to never see him again. But he continues to stalk her, or his obsession with her. So then she has an abortion and he then sues her. He sues the woman and she's never filed any claim for rape or incest. What protections does your bill have for women who may be maliciously sued by rapists, by people who are stalking them, by ex-husbands who just want to sue the heck out of that ex-wife or a woman and just drag her through courts? What protections do we have for the defendant, for the woman in this case who's being maliciously prosecuted by
Representative,
a
the
former
woman
lover?
is not a defendant in this case.
I'm sorry?
The woman is not a defendant under this bill.
Okay, what protections is there for the individual who does pursue the abortion, who receives the abortion, when she is maliciously litigated or maliciously prosecuted?
Representative, the person receiving the abortion is not a defendant under a cause of action in this bill.
What protection is it for the person who is aiding and abetting the person receiving the abortion, who is part of this cause of action? What protection is that for that person if somebody just wants to maliciously litigate the person who is aiding and abetting the individual receiving the abortion?
We have laws prohibiting frivolous and vexatious litigation. Under this amendment, a civil action may not be brought by a person who impregnated the abortion patient through an act of rape, sexual assault, incest, or any other of those prohibited penal code. Okay.
What additional protections are for anybody who is litigating just to make it difficult for that person and make it hard for them to just help anybody that's pursuing this abortion? What in your bill, because you're very clear and very extensive, as a matter of fact, they have up to 6 years, up to the 6th anniversary of the date.
Members, please confine your remarks to the subject of the bill, to the amendment on the bill.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. What do you have in this bill? And according to your amendment, are there any additional protections for there to be vexatious litigation? Within your amendment, are you going to be addressing that?
This amendment specifically addresses those who do not have standing to bring a cause of action because they impregnated the abortion patient through an act of rape, sexual assault, incest, or any of the other enumerated prohibitions.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative.
Mr. Slayton, for what purpose?
Yes, sir. Does the gentlelady yield for some questions?
Does the lady yield for questions?
I will yield for questions.
She yields for questions.
Thank you. I had a couple questions here. Ms. Lawson, your bill would seek to protect life at detectable heartbeat. Who would be the one determining?
Members, please confine your remarks to the subject of the amendment.
Oh, I'll have to wait and ask on the bill.
You will. Yes, sir.
Move adoption of the amendment.
Does
Mr.
any
Speaker.
member wish to speak for, against, or on the amendment? The question occurs on adoption of the amendment. A record vote has been requested by Mrs. Noble. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Ms. Swanson voting aye. Show Ms. Hull voting aye. Mr. Murphy voting aye. Mr. Leach voting aye. Ms. Click voting aye. Ms. Slauson voting aye. Mr. Goldman voting aye. We'll give you plenty of time to vote from your desk, members. All members voting. Mr. Parker voting aye. Ms. Hull voting aye. Mr. Kaysen voting aye. All members voting. There being 136 ayes, 6 nays, the amendment is adopted. The following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Slauson.
The chair recognizes Ms. Slauson to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I offer a perfecting amendment that will do two things here. It clarifies that the right to a civil action refers expressly to this subchapter, and it reduces the statute of limitations from 6 years to 4 years. And with that, I move adoption.
The question occurs on adoption of the amendment. The record of vote has been requested by Ms. Noble. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Ms. Click voting aye, Ms. Lawson voting aye, Ms. Hull voting aye, Ms. Swanson voting aye, Mr. Leach voting aye, Ms. Johnston of Dallas County voting aye, Dr. Oliverson voting aye, Ms. Morales voting aye, so Mr. Kaysen voting aye. Members, you have voting devices on your desk. You're welcome to use them. All members voting. There being 145 ayes, 0 nays, the amendment is adopted. The following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Dutton.
The chair recognizes Mr. Dutton to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I hope you can read this amendment, or will read it. What it does is it says that to the extent that we cause a woman to have a child, bear a child, that she otherwise would have had an abortion for, we are going to provide medical care for that child till that child is 18. We are also going to provide tuition for that child to go to school. Now you might ask, why would I do this amendment? Well, let me tell you this. I think there's a whole lot of difference between being pro-life and pro-birth. Because if you're pro-birth, you don't care much about what happens to that child afterwards. You just care about that child being born. Well, what this amendment says is that if we adopt that as a philosophy, we recognize that that child needs medical care, and one of the best things we could do for that child is provide an opportunity for that child to go to college. And that's all this amendment does. And I understand there's been an agreement to take some of this amendments
Mr.
away,
Speaker?
and so I'm going to withdraw the amendment.
Ms. Ramos, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
The gentleman yields.
Mr. Representative Dutton, I want to thank you for this because it is important not only to be pro-life, if that's the case, but also be pro-living. And this is exactly what this amendment does, in that it is pro-living. It is once the child is born. Speaking to your amendment regarding higher education, do you know what percentage, or is it your understanding there's a high percentage of these children that may be born in certain situations, financially challenged situations, having challenges with paying for higher education?
Many times that's the case. That's what happens to a number of women, and as I understand it. As a practicing Catholic myself, I don't like abortion myself. But I recognize that that ought to be a woman's right. And it ought to be our obligation, when we override that right, to provide for that child. And so that's what this amendment says, that our commitment is not only going to be to the birth of that child, but to that child maintaining health care and education.
Thank you, Representative Dutton, because as it is, and what we're arguing today is the freedom to choose what one does with one individual's body. But this allows, once we ban that freedom, this is saying that the child has a freedom to be educated. If the government wants to make the decision for the woman, then the government should also carry the investment in that child's higher education. So I want to thank you. I think this is a great amendment, and it's unfortunate that it's withdrawn. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, thank you all for this opportunity. I hope this causes, at least, I don't think it'll change anybody's mind, but I hope it at least pricks your heart to recognize that there are children who are being born who need health care, and whatever education we can provide them, we have an obligation to do it. And I withdraw the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
The amendment is withdrawn. Ms. Collier. The chair recognizes Ms. Collier to speak against the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I have utmost respect for Representative Slauson. She carries herself so very well and professional in front of this legislative body, but I just completely disagree with this legislation. I'm here to speak against this measure. And I want to, guys, go back and think about what Representative Turner talked about, these unintended pregnancies. I was 15 when I got pregnant my first time. And the first thing I did was I confided in a friend, and I talked about how scared I was. I mean, I was on the cheerleading team. I was captain of the cheerleading team. I was on the track team, and I was very afraid. And so I went to a clinic, and I'd lived in D.C., the area, so I wasn't here, but I went to a clinic called Planned Parenthood, and they gave me my options. I couldn't go through with it. I decided not to do that. That was my choice. It was a personal decision for me. But because of my choice doesn't mean that I need to put that in somebody else's and make that their choice. Why should what I want and decide for myself supersede what someone else believes is best for them? And that's what this bill does in my mind. This bill eliminates that option. And I can tell you right now, as a scared teenager, I didn't know what I was going to do. But I did have people around me that were able to provide resources. But that's not available for everyone. Not everyone comes from a two-parent household that can help them raise their child. Not everyone has a job that can help them supply the necessities of raising a child. And so what we're doing is creating what I like to think are unintended consequences, or maybe they're intended, but we're setting people up to fail by not giving them the option. By eliminating and reducing what is already existing legal, what's legal in our state, we are substituting our judgment, our moral opinion on all of Texans. We're not giving them that choice. Even God gives us a choice. God gives us the right mind. He gives us a mind to make those decisions for ourselves. And only God judges us. And so, but today, the state legislator is saying, no, we're going to tell you the right thing to do. We're going to make that decision for you. In fact, you are saying that what God has allowed, you're going to take that away too. I'm going to say it as far as that, and that's how I see this. The reason I say that is because we're not giving that choice to anyone. And again, as a teen mother myself, I was very lucky and grateful to have my family, but not everybody is. So what are we going to do? What concerns me is that I hear everybody talking about life and protecting life. But how are we protecting life? How are we protecting life when we attempt to criminalize homelessness? How are we protecting life when we have the highest rate of uninsured Texans? How are we protecting life when there's too many children that go home hungry every day? I don't see us fulfilling that quest when we have these measures in front of us.
Mr. Speaker?
Ms. Rose, for what purpose?
Does the lady yield?
Does the lady yield for questions?
Yes, I yield.
The lady yields.
Representative Collier, you and I are classmates, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And this is our 5th legislative session, correct?
Yes, it is.
Each legislative session, haven't we had to deal with this issue?
We have time and time again.
And I know today, it's a little edgy around here, but isn't it kind of frustrating to continue to have to deal with this issue?
It is so frustrating, and it seems like every year we come back and it's chipped away. Any type of responsibility that I have for myself, any type of control that I have over myself is chipped away, and it's chipping away at me as a person. Every year the legislature comes and takes away some right that I have.
Wouldn't you say, though, each session, though, we fail to expand Medicaid for people who need health care?
Absolutely, and that's about preserving life.
And you know, sometimes I think the only time this body cares about a person is when it's in the womb. But when a person is here living, we chip away everything. They go to prison, they come back, they can't get housing, they can't get a job, and we make all of those barriers for them in this body. But it seems the only time we want to stand up and care about a life is when it's in the womb.
Exactly. In fact, what I want us to do is I want members to stop pandering to a small base of their voters and start talking about the real issues that we need to address as a legislature. We have issues in dealing with strengthening our infrastructure from the Winter Storm Uri. We need to strengthen our power grid. Those are things that we need to focus on. We need to focus on increasing access to quality health care. These are issues that are meat and potato issues that impact the daily lives of all Texans, instead of a small portion of Texans that you want to pander to your base. Let's focus on the real issues in front of us right now. And those are the issues in front of us. Improving and making sure our education system is stable and there. There's so many things that we could be talking about instead of wasting time on something that is unconstitutional, that is legal right now, that we're just wasting this time on. We need to focus on the real issues in front, and Texans deserve that. Texans deserve better.
I just know our districts are basically the same, and when we go home after the legislative session, people are concerned about health care, education, the economy, and they're concerned about jobs. Is this an issue that your constituents just hound you about?
Absolutely, and they also want us to eliminate and remove the systemic racism that's in our criminal justice system.
Members, please take your conversation outside the building.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. They also want us to work on eliminating and removing the systemic racism that's in our criminal justice system.
Wouldn't it be great right now if we were having a conversation about COVID-19 and how it's going to continue to impact communities after this pandemic?
Absolutely, it sure would. Thank you so much for bringing that up. It sure would be a great conversation.
Thank you, Rep. Collier.
Thank you. And members, I just want us to get back to doing what our Texans are expecting us to do, and that's to pass good legislation, not waste their tax dollars on defending lawsuits that are frivolous. We're just expanding, I hear so many people saying TLR, Texas Lawsuit Reform people, they said don't have so many lawsuits. This is going to open more lawsuits. In fact, I can't wait to file a lawsuit. I could use that $10,000. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Ms. Hinojosa to speak against the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was raised Mexican Catholic. I am still Catholic. And in that tradition, the value and culture of dignity is held in high esteem. Dignidad. The dignity of life, yes, and of respecting family relationships, and the dignity of a quiet modesty about personal family issues. So talking about such intimate matters in public is very uncomfortable for me. It is very uncomfortable for a lot of women, probably most women in this chamber, and for many men. It's very uncomfortable for women in this state. But here we go again. When legislation like this is brought, we're forced to talk about these most intimate parts of our lives in public, for all to hear, for all to see. 18 years ago, I was pregnant with my first pregnancy. And I was overjoyed. We were overjoyed. That pregnancy wasn't meant to be. We learned late in my second trimester that my child had a terrible sickness called trisomy 18, and it meant that every cell in her body was sick. And that was not compatible with life, the doctors told me. I was also told that I had a week to make a decision about whether or not to terminate the pregnancy. I took that whole week. It was the hardest decision of my life. It was spent in prayer, in conversation with my husband, conversation with my family members who have always been pro-life telling me, this is different, Gina. It's okay to terminate this pregnancy. I got into arguments with my priest, with the sister at my church. They counseled me through this. And ultimately, I made the decision and I made the choice not to terminate the pregnancy. She didn't make it. She was born shortly after her due date, and she didn't make it. But it was in making that choice that I experienced God's grace. It was in making that choice that I found my own strength. And why would we take that opportunity, that choice, away from anyone, from any woman in this state? Isn't that what life is about? The choices that we make? The crossroads I was at to make a decision. I probably would not be standing here today had I not been through this experience. Of course, I would never judge a woman who made the other experience, who chose to terminate her pregnancy, who chose an abortion. I had all the resources, health insurance, supportive husband, supportive family. And still, who knows, 5 years later, if I would have made a different choice. I could have easily made a different choice. Before we judge, walk a mile in her shoes. Before we judge. We are not here to judge, members. We are here to make laws for the well-being of Texans. And the jurisdiction of the laws of Texas should not enter my body, should not enter any woman's body, should not enter any person's body. Where's the dignity in that? If we want to stop abortion, we do it in our churches, we do it in our communities, we do it in conversation with women, in relationship with women. We support families. We don't do it by government mandate.
The chair recognizes Ms. Howard to speak against the bill. Members, please refrain from outbursts on the House floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I noticed while my female colleagues were speaking that many gentlemen in this room were busy doing other things and not paying attention, and I know we all have those choices. But for those that are purporting to be here supporting this bill about life, I would hope that you would also have the respect for those that are living up here before you that have to deal with this issue on a regular basis. I am old enough that I was coming of age as a young woman before Roe v. Wade. Many of you in here weren't even born then. But there I was as a young adult, without the choices that people have before them today. And I can tell you it was a very different world. It's a very different world when I had to have my father's signature to get a credit card because I was a woman. And even though I was on my own, working, paying my way through school, I couldn't get my own credit card without a man signing for me. I had many women around me, young women that from years as a teenager as well as a young adult, who ended up getting pregnant because we didn't even have access to birth control. If you weren't married, you couldn't get a contraceptive back then. Unbelievable. Oh, and let me remind you guys, it takes two to tango. But it's the woman who is bearing the pregnancy. I had family members and friends who faced these choices even after Roe v. Wade came to be. I'm thinking of 3 family members in particular. One of them, and they were all 3 in very difficult, challenging situations, very challenging situations. One of them chose to have her baby, and I'm thrilled that she did. She's thrilled that she did. One of them chose to go away for a while, which is what we did back then, and came back without having her baby because she gave her baby up for adoption. That was her choice. I can't tell you how she feels about it today because I haven't asked her lately, but I know it had an impact on her that she gave up a baby. But she had no options to support that baby, and she was a teenager. And then I have a third family member who made the choice to have an abortion. And it was the best choice for her to have made in terms of what ended up happening with her life and what would have been tragically different had she not. 3 different choices in one family. That's the whole point here, is that we need to have the options before us. We're the ones that carry the babies. We're the ones that raise those babies. Sometimes there's a man there with us, and sometimes there's not. And let me tell you that a lot of times there's not. As my colleagues so eloquently said in their statements just previous to mine, walk a mile in someone else's shoes before you make these judgments. This legislature should not be dictating what we do as women with our own bodies. I have comments here that I'm not going to go through, but I do want to make one particular one, and that has to do with our medical community. The healthcare providers, the physicians who are practicing medicine, who are delivering healthcare, who are delivering this legal medical procedure because it's been decided this is the best option for their patient. This bill is jeopardizing their license, their livelihood, what they put years in to accomplish. This bill is jeopardizing them, and that is why the Texas Medical Association opposes the private cause of action, because of how far-reaching it could be, implicating hospitals and fetal and maternal health doctors who refer to abortion providers in circumstances that are far beyond the medical expertise of this legislative body. People should have the ability to make reproductive health decisions that they feel are best for themselves and their futures, and they should be able to have the assurance that those decisions will be safe. We do not want to return to a time when women had to hide in the shadows and risk their health and their very lives with unsafe procedures in order to receive these health care services.
Mr. Speaker?
Ms. Gervin Hawkins, for purpose.
Will the gentlelady yield for questions?
The lady yield for question. Lady yields.
You know, Representative Howard, as you was talking, I was reflecting back when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, and where were those women going for abortions?
Right.
How many came home damaged?
Yes.
Wasn't there hanger wires back then?
There were indeed.
Dark rooms?
Yes.
Unsanitary places?
Yes.
And something that you said earlier, you said abortions will always happen. Would you think that we have a right to protect those who have to go in those dark corners?
Absolutely, I would. We have a legal medical procedure right now that we are obstructing access to. We do not want to go back into those dark corners.
And then when you have these doctors who will be criminally liable for such an action.
Yes.
It would be hurtful to our overall society. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Representative Howard, I know you fought this issue and you've shared your story, and many of you have shared your story. But I believe our colleagues need to truly understand, if they see a young woman that comes home that bleeds to death, that dies from not being properly having the sterilization that they need, it is a horrible situation. And why would we, in the 21st century, deal with that again?
I don't want to go back.
So would you agree the biggest message we need to give our colleagues is, let's not go backwards, let's move forward. And if there's an abortion to be had, let it happen in the right circumstances, with one's choice that they have made and that they have to live with their God with. Would you agree that's the right thing to do?
I would.
And it's not a political issue or a partisan issue. It is truly a human rights issue.
I agree.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you. Just close by saying that we live by relationships in this room. That's how we do our business. We're going to have disagreements. I realize that everybody is coming to this with their own particular beliefs and faith as they decide how they want to pursue this. There's no argument I could ever give that says that we're not talking about a developing life in the uterus. I get that. I get that. But I'm making a decision based on my faith and the way that I have been raised, my moral universe, which may or may not overlap exactly with yours, but I would wager that we share more than we are different here. And I have every confidence that the choices that I am making to support a woman's choice to control her own body is supporting life. I will choose to call it that. That's what I believe. And I hope that we can get past this with our relationships intact and continue to do the work we do and not be judgmental of one another in terms of what our own particular faith beliefs might be. We're all, no matter what you believe, we're all part of the one, however you would like to define that. And I am going to recognize and respect your position on things. I hope you will do the same for all of us that are up here, and understand that we are also coming from a place of values and morals and faith and life. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes Mrs. Slauson to close on the bill.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Toth, for what purpose?
respectfully, could we have this discussion committed to the journal notes?
Member, you heard the motion. The objection. Chair hears none, so ordered. Mr. Slayton, for what purpose?
Does the gentlelady yield for some questions?
Does the lady yield for questions?
I will yield for some questions, Representative.
She yields.
Thank you. So your bill would seek to protect life at detectable heartbeat. Who would be the one determining whether or not there's a detectable heartbeat?
Medical professional.
Okay. Is there anything in Senate Bill 8 that would require the physician to record any audio or video confirming that there's no heartbeat?
Senate Bill 8 requires the physician to perform an appropriate test for the detection of a heartbeat and to enter into the medical record the results of that test.
After the abortion's performed, is there any way other than taking the physician's word for it to confirm whether there actually was or was not a heartbeat?
I'm sorry, would you repeat your question?
So after an abortion is performed, is there any way other than taking the physician's word for it to confirm whether there was actually or was not a heartbeat?
The medical record is required to have an entry in it representative reflecting the results of that test.
Okay, thank you. And the 14th Amendment of the United States provides no state shall deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. I believe the 14th Amendment applies to life in the womb, and thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, members and Mr. Speaker. We do important work under this dome.
Mr. Speaker,
Ms. Ramos, for what purpose?
will the gentlelady yield for some questions?
Would lady yield for questions?
I will yield for some questions.
Thank you, Representative Slauson. In reviewing your bill and kind of going back to the question, I just want a little clarification. What your bill on page 6, the civil liability for violation, and I didn't see it, so I just want clarification. Is anywhere in your bill, does anywhere in your bill state a cause of action against the impregnated woman?
The woman is not a defendant in a cause of action under this bill.
So this is about a procedure done on the woman by those who've assisted the woman, but not the woman per se?
This cause of action is designed to protect a heart, to protect an unborn child after the detection of a heartbeat. Pardon me.
Why are we not including the woman as a defendant? I just want clarification. Why are you not including a woman as a defendant in your bill if she's the one that's making the decision?
Representative, I did not wish to include a woman as a defendant under this act.
Why not? It was her choice. Why not prosecute the woman?
Representative, I do not wish to prosecute a woman under
Why
this
not?
act.
She made the choice. Would we not also hold her accountable and have her sued and have her pay those violations for making that decision?
Through this act, we seek to protect innocent unborn life once a heartbeat is detected.
But the woman is carrying the quote-unquote innocent life. Why are we not prosecuting the woman?
The focus of this act is to protect an innocent unborn child upon the detection of a heartbeat.
Does that child act alone? The unborn child, are they acting alone?
I'm not sure I understand the nature of your question, but the goal of this act is to protect that innocent unborn child upon the detection of a heartbeat.
So going back to my original question, if the woman is the one making the decision, why are we not vilifying the woman as well? If in fact she's making the decision and we know the unborn child is not making the decision by themselves or acting on their own pretense, should we not also go after the woman? According to your philosophy, your theory, your explanation, this is attacking an unborn child. Why not go after the women? Why not put them in jail? Why not sue them? Why not give them jail time?
Representative, the goal of this bill is to protect innocent unborn life upon the detection of a heartbeat.
Could it be because it's the wrong thing to do? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, members. We do important work under this dome, and we have important debate and dialogue on a wide variety of issues. This one today is very possibly one of the most important conversations that we can have. I want to thank you, every single one of you, for that conversation, and I want to particularly thank everyone who has worked many months so hard on the Texas Heartbeat Act. We all come into today and into this conversation from different backgrounds and different experiences, and those shape us in a variety of ways. I have had the privilege of carrying children and am the proud mother of 2 brilliant and amazing little girls. But there's a middle daughter that none of you will see in any of my photographs, who I labor for personally as I stand up here today. About 9 years ago, I listened to the beautiful melody of her heartbeat. Her heartbeat. And then I listened, kind of in a tunnel, to a doctor talk about a severe abnormality. And we rallied around her in prayer, this tiny little life that was so much greater than myself. And then one day, I listened to the deafening silence of the absence of that heartbeat. And when she passed, we grieved, and honestly, it was really hard sometimes not to question why I would get to see her and hear her, but not hold her. I knew my middle daughter through the cadence of her heartbeat. That sound was her song, and it was the anthem of tens of thousands of sons and daughters who are worth our protection when we vote on this Heartbeat Act today. And while I didn't get to hold my middle daughter, I enjoy the tremendous privilege of having this conversation with you and standing for her heartbeat and her life in here today. For far too long, abortion has meant the end of a beating heart. But through this, the Texas Heartbeat Act, that beautiful melody of a beating heart will mean the protection of those innocent unborn lives in Texas. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I move passage of Senate Bill 8.
Members, before we vote, I want to remind all members and guests in the gallery to please refrain from demonstrations. Question occurs on passage to third reading, SB 8. A record vote has been requested by Ms. Noble. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Ms. Hull voting aye, Ms. Slauson voting aye, Ms. Swanson voting aye, Ms. Click voting aye, Ms. Morrison voting aye, Mr. Leach voting aye, Ms. Button voting aye, Ms. Noble voting aye. All members voting. There being 81 ayes, 63 nays, SB 8 is passed to third reading. Please excuse Representative Lambert because I'm important business in the district on the motion of Representative Stuckey. The objection, chair hears none, so ordered. The chair recognizes Ms. Click for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend House Rule 8, Section 5D, to designate as joint sponsors and co-sponsors for SB 8 all joint authors and co-authors for HB 1515 who sign on to HB 1515 before SB 8 passes the House on third reading.
Members, you heard the motion. Objection, chair hears none. Motion is adopted. Ms. Hull, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, move Representative Slauson's bill layout, her opening and her close comments be reduced to writing and placed in the journal.
Members, you heard the motion. Objection to the motion, chair hears none. Motion is adopted.